Hi everybody! The innate immunity is also called as non-specific immunity. They are quickly killed by some of the components of the immune system. Definitely the pathogens will not enter the body. This mucous membrane is going to act as a mechanical barrier. There is one more very important thing which you should understand. The mode of action might be slow, but it is going to long for a longer time. Welcome back to session 4 of this very important chapter 8 called Human Health and Diseases. What did we learn in session 3 then? We learnt about amoebiasis, we learnt about ascariasis, then we learnt about elephantiasis, then about the ringworm disease and the prevention and control of infectious diseases. In today's session, we are going to study about a very important concept called immunization. Already we have come across this term called immunization in the last sessions. So we are going to go in detail what are the types of immunity, that is the innate immunity and the acquired immunity, and what are the types. As I said, the innate immunity is also called as non-specific immunity, which acts as a barrier. So what are the different types of barriers? All that we are going to study in today's session. Moving on to the very important concepts of today's session, that is vaccination and immunization. Already in the previous sessions you have studied about what is vaccination and what is immunization. Vaccination and immunization are based on the property of memory of the immune system. So what is a vaccine then? How do we define a vaccine? A vaccine is called as an inactivated or attenuated antigenic protein of a pathogen. So as I said, vaccination and immunization are based on the property of memory of the immune system. And what is an vaccine? Vaccine is nothing but an inactivated or attenuated antigenic protein of a pathogen. When this vaccine is introduced into the body, it starts producing antibodies and starts killing the pathogens. So this term called vaccine has a great importance in the life of an individual. So by massive vaccination and immunization, there is complete eradication of many diseases like smallpox. I think all of us know that smallpox and plague is completely eradicated, and I think all of you know the polio is almost at the verge of eradication, and right now we are waiting for a vaccine for the coronavirus. Hope so it comes soon so that we can fight against this deadliest coronavirus and save ourselves, right? So vaccination is a very important to fight against the disease causing organisms. As I said, this massive vaccination and immunization, due to this there is a complete eradication of many diseases like smallpox, and even we come across large number of diseases like polio, diphtheria, pneumonia, tetanus have been controlled in a larger extent by this vaccination. And as I said, right now we are eagerly waiting for a vaccine to be discovered so that we can save ourselves from this deadly coronavirus, and the whole world is shaken by this deadliest coronavirus or due to this coronavirus pandemic. Hope so the day is going to come soon, right? Now, as you know, immunity of the body is very important, and it is this immunity which is going to fight against the disease causing organisms. As I said, right now in the present scenario we need to boost our immunity. Why should we boost our immunity? So that we can fight against this deadliest coronavirus. So what is immunity then? The overall ability of an individual, of a host, to fight with the disease causing organisms by the immune system is called immunity. So how do we define the word called immunity? The overall ability of the host to fight against the disease causing organisms by immune system is called immunity. As such, there are two types of immunity. One is called innate immunity, which is also called as non-specific immunity. Non-specific immunity. it is not going to act specifically on a particular type of antigen. What is an antigen? It is nothing but the microbes that enter our body and cause diseases. So innate immunity is also called as non-specific immunity, and the second one is called acquired immunity, which is also called as the specific immunity, where that vaccine is taken. When the vaccine is taken, and that vaccine is going to act on that particular antigen only. So it is going to produce antibodies to kill that particular antigen, and such a type of immunity is called acquired immunity. Hope you have understood what is immunization. Vaccination or immunization are nothing but the two very important, it is based on the property of what? Memory of the immune system. And what is a vaccine? Vaccine is nothing but an inactivated or attenuated antigenic protein of a pathogen. When it is introduced into the body, definitely it is going to produce antibodies, and those antibodies is going to kill the pathogen and protect our body from the diseases. And as I said, massive immunization or vaccination has definitely prevented, or it has almost eradicated large number of diseases like the smallpox and even polio. I think a lot of awareness was created about this polio drops, and almost I think this disease is almost eradicated. Even plague is eradicated. But if we don't maintain hygienic conditions, if we don't keep our environment clean, then days are not far away where we get back all these diseases once again. Right now already we are just facing this deadliest virus, and imagine those. Yes, of course, we as human beings have come across many diseases, and we have the capacity to fight against these disease causing organisms because of what we call it as immunity. So what is immunity then? Immunity is nothing but the overall ability of the host to fight with disease causing organisms by the immune system is called immunity. As I said, there are two types of immunity. What are the two types? What are the two types of immunity? One is called innate immunity. As I said, innate immunity is also called as what? Non-specific immunity. And the other one is called acquired immunity, which is also called specific immunity. You can see the child here, the immunization or the vaccination. And I think all of us know that immunization program is a very famous program we can call by the health department to in anticipation, like for example, in anticipation of the getting diseases in the coming days, this immunization program is given to the newborn also. So as soon as the child is born, it is kept on an immunization program for 5 long years, so that it will develop that immunity in anticipation of the body being prone to certain disease causing organism. May it be like for example BCG is given for against TB, then TPT against diphtheria, pertussis and tetanus. So MMR, mumps, measles, rubella, all these are the vaccination programs or immunization program which is given to a small baby up to an age of 5 years in anticipation that so hope in future course of time it will not get these diseases. So vaccination and immunization are largely used to eradicate deadliest diseases like polio, then smallpox, plague, pneumonia, tetanus, and right now we are waiting for the vaccine for a coronavirus. Now, as I said, there are two types of immunity. One is called innate immunity or non-specific immunity. What is this innate immunity? It is called inborn immunity. What do you mean by inborn immunity? Right from the birth, we would have developed this immunity, and this immunity is going to last for a longer time. And the mode of action is slow when compared to acquired immunity. The mode of action is very fast in acquired immunity, but in case of innate immunity, it is slow, but it is going to last for a longer time because this is an inborn immunity. It is not an instant immunity which we are going to develop like the acquired immunity. It's an inborn immunity that occurs by birth. And this innate immunity is called as the first line of defense. So which is the first line of defense? That is nothing but the innate immunity is called the first line of defense, which is going to protect our body from disease causing organisms or from the disease causing pathogens. So it consists, and this innate immunity consists of many barriers. What do you mean by barriers? Obstructions. that which is going to obstruct the entry of the pathogens entering the host body and causing the diseases. So these are the barriers that prevent the entry of the foreign agents into the body. So these obstructions are definitely going to prevent the entry of these pathogens and causing the diseases. So if at all they enter, by chance they enter, they are quickly killed by some other components of this system. So what is innate immunity? If at all, see, as I said, it is right from the birth. And when so any foreign body may enter our body, then foreign particle or foreign molecule, which we call it as antigens, or the microbes, when they enter the body, they are killed by the immune system. And this is called the first line of defense. This forms the first line of defense. And as I said, it consists of various barriers which is going to obstruct the entry of the pathogens into the host body. If at all they enter, they are quickly killed by some of the components of the immune system. So that is about innate immunity. As I said, it is called non-specific. Why it is called non-specific? It is not going to act on a particular antigen. Whichever antigens enter our body, it is going to counteract it, kill it. So that is why it is called non-specific. It is not acting on a specific or a particular type of antigen that enters our body like an acquired immunity. So what are the different types of barriers? As I said, you can classify them into different barriers. One is called the physical barriers. The physical barriers. Physical barriers are also called surface barriers. Two is called physiological barriers. Physiological barriers. Then cytokine barriers. Then interferons, and fifth one called inflammatory barriers. Inflammatory barriers. What are the types of barriers? As I said, barriers are going to prevent the entry of the pathogen or the disease causing organism into the body. And what are the different types of barriers you come across? One is called physical barrier, which is also called as surface barrier, and physiological barriers, cytokine barriers, then interferons and inflammatory barriers. Now let us discuss one by one. That is the first one called physical barriers. As I said, it is also called as what? Surface barriers. And the physical barriers mainly comprises of the skin. Here you can see the skin. Second one is the mucous membrane. The mucous membrane that lines the digestive system, respiratory system, or the reproductive tract, all those form the membrane that forms the lining of those organs. It is called as the physical barriers or surface barriers. Skin also acts as a surface barrier. So now let us see one by one. So physical barriers comprises of what? Skin and mucous membrane. As I said, skin and mucous membrane that line the various parts of the body act as surface barriers against the entrance of pathogens. As long as these barriers remain unbroken, then the pathogens are unable to penetrate them. So till these physical barriers are functional, definitely the pathogens will not enter the body. So as long as these remain unbroken, pathogens are unable to penetrate them. Now let us see one by one. So what are the physical barriers? Physical barriers are the obstructions which prevent the entry of the pathogen into the host body, and the physical barrier or the surface barrier comprises of what? Skin and the mucous membrane. Now let us study about skin. What is skin? As you know, it covers the body and other organs and separates from the environment. For example, like the skin of a body, it is forming a protective layer and it is protecting a body from the environment. As we know, we are prone to the environmental conditions, may it be heat or it may be cold. So it protects our body from the external environment. So it covers the body that and the other organs and separates from the environment where disease causing organisms are present. For example, even on the skin, because as you know, it is exposed to the environment, obviously there are chances of the disease causing pathogens found on the skin, but still we don't fall sick or we don't get diseases. Why? Because skin acts as a barrier, and you know what does the skin, and this is called the first line of defense. Skin is called as the first line of defense, and skin also has some bacteria. So how does this skin protect our body from disease causing organism? How is it acting as a physical barrier in protecting our body from disease causing organism? Because it all, as I said, skin has some bacteria that release certain acids and some other metabolic waste that is going to inhibit the growth of the pathogens. So it will not allow the multiplication of the pathogens. As you know, the very important characteristic feature of pathogens or the disease causing organisms is what? Multiplication. They multiply very rapidly. So when their multiplication is inhibited by certain acids or chemicals, that is metabolic waste that is released by the skin, then definitely the pathogens will not enter our body. Hope you have understood what are the different types of barriers. Different barriers form what? They are nothing but a form of innate immunity or non-specific immunity, and there are 5 types of barriers. One is called the physical barrier, which is also called as surface barrier. Physiological barriers like the saliva, tear gland, lacrimal gland, sebaceous gland, sebum, all those form the physiological barriers, and the cytokine barriers, that is about the phagocytes and the interferons, and the inflammatory barriers form the innate type of immunity. And as I said, the physical barrier is also called a surface barrier, which comprises of what? Skin and the mucous membrane. Moving on to the mucous membrane. As I said, the mucous membrane, membrane means what? The mucus means what? The sticky like substance that forms the covering of certain organs. It forms the epithelial layer of certain organs, like the lining of the digestive system, like the lining of the digestive system, the respiratory system, and the urinary system, and the reproductive system, to create a mechanical barrier against the entrance of the infectious pathogens. So the lining, the mucous membrane lining all these organs is going to, this mucous membrane is going to act as a mechanical barrier, obstructing the entry of the pathogens entering these very important organs. So as you know, all these are very, very important organs which do a very great role in various physiological processes. So protecting these organs from the disease causing pathogens is very, very important, and it is made possible by this mucous membrane. And this, as I said, these membranes secrete what? Mucus, which traps many pathogens, the sticky like substance, hence the name mucous membrane. And this is going to trap the microorganisms or the pathogens that enter the body, and it will make, and it is going to kill it. So for example, you take the nasal cavity. So you can see the mucous membrane inside the nasal cavity, which is going to, so by from the air, when we breathe in, some of the microorganisms enter our nose, but all those microorganisms are trapped in the mucous membrane that is formed in the nasal cavity. So the cilia also, the vibratory movement of the cilia will also prevent further entry of the microorganisms into the respiratory system, So mucous membrane also is a very, very important barrier that obstructs the entry of the pathogens into the body. Moving across the physiological barriers. So far we studied about the physical barriers, namely which comprises of the skin and the mucous membrane. Now let us study about the physiological barriers, namely the tear, the sweat, the sebum, saliva, and the gastric juice. All these form the physiological barriers. So what are the physiological barriers? Tear, then sweat, then sebum, that is the oil gland, then saliva, and the gastric juice form the physiological barriers. Now let us see one by one. Tear, as you know, tear glands are found where? In the eye. So that which are called as lacrimal glands. So what is the function of tears? It is one form of expressing our emotions. So tears are going to roll out of our eyes when we are emotional, like we have a lot of emotions, may it be like sadness, may it be happiness. You can see the running of the tears from our eyes. But not only it is used to express our emotions, it has a great great role to play. What is that? So the tears are going to wash away the microorganisms and keep the eyeballs clean. See what a wonderful job these tears are doing. So it is one form of expressing our emotions or expressions, and not only that, it is going to wash away or clean our eyeball from the microorganisms. Such a wonderful job this physiological barrier does. Now what is sweat? Sweat also, I think all of us know, secreted by the sweat glands of the skin, and it also keeps the surface of the body moist so that it not gets dried up, but at the same time flushes out some of the microorganisms from the skin. So obviously, as I said, our skin is exposed to the environmental conditions, so there might be some microorganisms sticking the skin, but what the sweat is going to do? So not only it is going to keep our body surface moist, and also it regulates temperature, but at the same time it is going to kill the microorganisms that are found in the skin. I think all of you know the gastric juice secreted by the gastric glands gastric glands of the stomach will produce what? HCl. And this HCl is definitely going to kill the large amount of bacteria that enters our body, maybe through food, right? So when we eat food, it might not be clean. So many microorganisms would have entered our digestive system. But see what a wonderful job these gastric glands do. The gastric glands lining the wall of the stomach secretes HCl, and this HCl has two important roles to play. One is it is an activator of an enzyme, right? And as you know, most of the enzymes will be in an inactivated state, which needs to be activated when needed, and HCl is one such activator. And not only that, it is going to kill large amount of bacteria that enter along with the food. Next, sebum, secreted by the sebaceous glands of the skin. You can also call them as oil glands. Our skin will be oily sometimes, right? So it is also forming what? A protective layer over the surface of the skin. So tears, sweat, sebum are a very, very important physiological barriers which is going to obstruct the entry of the pathogens entering the body and causing the diseases. Next, moving on to saliva. A very, very important thing. I think we have studied in first PUC in a chapter called digestion and absorption, where the saliva has a great role to play, because saliva contains salivary amylase, where most of the, you can say 3/4 of the carbohydrate is digested in the mouth itself. In spite of doing such a wonderful job of digesting proteins, digesting carbohydrate, it has one more role to play. That is, it is going to wash the microbes from the surface of the teeth. So as we eat food, sometimes when we don't clean our mouth, some of the microorganisms will be in between the teeth or sticking to the teeth. So those microorganisms are washed away by the saliva. So in spite of doing the process of digestion, it also does the process of eliminating the microorganisms that are found in between the teeth and the mucous membrane of the mouth. Our mouth, our buccal cavity is lined by mucous membrane. That is also going to protect our mouth from the disease causing organism. So the saliva contains what? An antibacterial enzyme, what we call it as lysozyme, that destroys many bacteria present in the mouth. So along with what? The salivary amylase, there is one more called lysozyme, which is going to kill the microorganism that enter along with the food. Or maybe, as I said, even in between the teeth we come across the microorganisms which is killed. So saliva also acts as a very important physiological barrier. As I said, the gastric juice secreted by the gastric glands that contain HCl, which kill large amount of bacteria. So all these forms what? The physiological barriers. So what are the, name the physical barriers? Skin and mucous membrane. Name the physiological barriers: tear, sweat, sebum, saliva and gastric juice form the physiological barriers. Moving on to the cellular barriers, which are also called as phagocytic barriers. You might have come across a word called phagocytosis, engulfing the foreign particle. By chance, but any foreign pathogen or a foreign molecule enters the body, it is ingested, and that ingestion of a foreign particle or a foreign molecule by the cell is called phagocytosis. So what do you mean by phagocytosis? It means the ingestion of solid particles or microbes by the cell membrane of certain cells. As I said, these cells are phagocytes, which form a non-specific resistance of the body, and this forms the second line of defense. whereas the physiological barrier and the physical barriers form the first line of defense, whereas this phagocytic barriers or the cellular barriers, cellular barriers are also called as what? Phagocytic barriers. They are going to form what? The second line of defense. For example, like the neutrophils and the monocytes, which are the prominent phagocytes. So whenever there is an entry of a foreign molecule or a pathogen, phagocytes migrate to that infected area. For example, there is a wound, right? So open wound is an open invitation for the germs or the microorganisms. So immediately phagocytes are going to migrate to that particular area and they are going to ingest or engulf the microbe that has entered through the open wound. So during this migration, they enlarge into actively phagocytic cells called macrophages. So they are going to become what? They are going to get transformed into actively phagocytic cells called macrophages, and they are going to engulf the foreign molecule or the pathogens. So there's one more very important thing which you should understand. There is a chemical substance called pyrogen released by the WBC. Now you may have a doubt, what is the role played by this pyrogen? So as you know, this pyrogen which is released by the WBC cells, here you can see blood has plasma, then red blood cells and the white blood cells and the platelets, right? So this, what is the function of this white blood cells? Which defend a body from disease causing organism. So there is a chemical substance called pyrogen which is released by the WBC cells, which is going to raise the body temperature and prevent the growth of microbes in the body. So this pyrogen is going to inhibit the growth of the microorganisms, thereby defending a body from the disease causing organisms. So even the pyrogen of WBC also plays a very great role, and it is called as what? Cellular barrier. Then one more called polymorphonuclear leukocytes. The short form is PMNL neutrophils. They are also called as macrophages, the natural killer cells in the blood tissues which kill the pathogen by phagocyte. These are also going to kill the microorganisms that is going to enter our body, right? So cellular barriers or phagocytic barriers comprises of what? Phagocytes. So what are phagocytes? What is phagocytosis? It means the ingestion of all the solid particles or the microbes by the cell membrane of certain cells. And what are phagocytes? Phagocytes migrate where? To the infected region through an open wound. When there is an open wound, they migrate to that particular area and become actively phagocytic cells called macrophages and engulf the pathogen. And as I said, even the WBC is going to release certain chemical substance called pyrogen, which is going to raise the body temperature and prevent the growth of microbes in our body. The one more is what? PMNL, that is which comprises of what? Macrophages and the NK cells, natural killer cells, which is found in the blood and the tissues. They are going to kill the pathogen by phagocytosis. Moving across the next very important barrier called Cytokine Barrier, which comprises of interferons, IFNs. This is a very, very important concept from examination point of view. So what are these cytokine barriers? Cytokine barriers comprises of interferons, IFN, right? What are they actually? They are nothing but interferons. They are nothing but the antiviral proteins or drugs secreted by the viral infected cells. So the viral infected cells itself is going to produce what you call this antiviral proteins. So this interferons prevents the multiplication of virus and triggering synthesis of several enzymes by the cells. So what will happen when these enzymes are produced? It is going to block the synthesis of the proteins which is required by the virus for multiplication. So interferons are going to inhibit the multiplication of the viruses, thereby inhibiting the pathogens from causing the diseases. So interferon proteins have proved to be effective in treating many diseases like influenza, like hepatitis and eye infection. And also nowadays it has been proved that IFNs have a great role to play in the cancer treatment also. Right, interferons play a very great role in the field of medicine in curing many diseases. As I said, here you can see the lymphocytes, macrophages, granulocytes, fibroblasts, all this. So these are all, we call them as what? We call them as cytokine barriers. Moving across the next very important barrier called inflammation barrier. I think all of us know when we have a fall, we may get hurt. So there is a small wound. So immediately you can see there is an inflammation happening in that particular region of the wound, and there is also a redness, and there is a what you call increase in the temperature in that particular area where we are hurt or where the wound is caused. So that particular property is called as inflammation. So what is inflammation then? Inflammation is the body's local response to an infection or infection due to injury. So whenever there is an injury, so it is immediately followed by an inflammation, redness, pain and slight warmness in that particular area. So what is the role played by this inflammatory barrier then? The function of inflammation is to destroy or inactivate the pathogen and set the stage for tissue repair. Obviously you might have come across that when there is an injury, so the cells get damaged in that particular area where the wound has caused, but after some time you can see the process of formation of a new tissue, and thereby the wound is cleared, right? So what is that very important property? That is about the inflammation. So the function of inflammation is to destroy or inactivate the pathogen and set the stage for tissue repair, right? So immediately the wound is healed. And how is it healed? By the formation of the tissues, and that is made possible by the inflammatory barrier. Not only it is going to, so obviously when there is an open, there is a wound due to injury, definitely it is an open invitation for the microorganisms, but immediately there is somebody to protect us from the disease causing organism, that is that is through inflammation, through pain, that is heat. So this is going to inhibit the growth of the microorganisms in that particular area. So when the cells are damaged, the injury sets off an inflammatory response, which is one of the body's internal system of defense. So this is also one means of protecting our body from the disease causing organisms. So because of all this, our body is able to fight against the disease causing organisms. If not, I think would have been prone to many diseases. So imagine how best our immune system is. So it is this immune system which is going to protect our body from disease causing organisms. So we should always boost our immunity by having food which is definitely going to boost our energy, right? So only when our immune system is good, definitely it can fight against any dreadful diseases, maybe even the coronavirus. As you know, we have already fought against many deadliest diseases like smallpox, plague, pneumonia, polio, tetanus, etc., etc. Why not even this coronavirus? Definitely we are going to fight against this deadliest coronavirus only when our immunity is enhanced. And I think that is the reason why we should be very careful, particularly about our food habits. The food what we eat should be nutritious, and we should increase the immunity of our body. We should not eat junk food. So at this point of time, I think definitely we'll understand how important our immune system is. Many people neglect. So particularly the lifestyle, the food habits, the sedentary lifestyle, all these are the factors which is going to affect our body and the immune system. So later on when we are prone to diseases, definitely I think immediately we'll be prone to the disease and we cannot fight it back, right? So symptoms are what? As I said, what are the symptoms of inflammatory barrier? Redness, pain, heat, then itching and swelling. Usually you might have come across when the wound is healing, we find itching in that particular region of the wound. So that's also an indication that it is getting healed. Then the events of inflammation are induced and regulated by large number of chemical mediators like histamine and prostaglandin, which are called as alarming chemicals. Very, very important. So whenever there is a wound, how does the inflammatory barrier come into rescue? It is because of the release of histamine and prostaglandin. So when there is injury, there is release of histamine and prostaglandin by the mast cells, and due to this, what will happen? Due to vasodilation, there is leakage of vascular fluid containing the serum proteins with antibacterial activity. So usually you can see the fluids coming out from the wound. So that is also one way of what? It is containing serum proteins with antibacterial activity. Further, there is influx of phagocyte cells. What do you mean by influx? There is an entry of the phagocytic cells into the affected area, and it is going to destroy the pathogen. So definitely even the inflammatory barrier is also responsible for what we call it as innate immunity, and all these are non-specific immunity. These are non-specific. So moving on to the next. So till now we were talking about innate immunity, that is a non-specific immunity. What is this acquired immunity? As I said, innate immunity is an inborn immunity which is got right from the birth, and as I said, the mode of action might be slow, but it is going to long for a longer time. So the immunity what we develop right from the birth is going to last for a longer time, and it is going to be throughout our life, and it is going to fight against the disease causing organisms. But whereas this acquired immunity is a temporary immunity, can say, that is called permanent immunity, this is called temporary immunity, and the mode of action is very fast. So when you take a vaccine for a particular disease, for example like coronavirus, immediately the disease can be cured, but it is a temporary immunity, I can say, then which is very fast, and but it is very it lasts for a very few days. So what is acquired immunity? Acquired immunity is a kind of resistance to specific antigens. For example, there is an outbreak of cholera, then a vaccination for cholera is given. So that vaccine is going to produce antibodies to fight against cholera disease only. So specific antibody for a specific antigen. Hence you use the word called specific immunity, or it is also called as what? Adaptive immunity. Then as I said, the cells will take part in the immune mechanisms, that is namely the lymphocytes and the macrophages. Because the immune system is responded by lymphocytes and macrophages, it is also called as adaptive immunity. Our body is going to adapt to that particular time when we are infected by a particular microorganism. Like for example right now, so every time we don't take a vaccine for coronavirus. So because there is an outbreak of coronavirus, at this point of time we are going to take the vaccine for coronavirus. So we are going to develop immunity against that coronavirus for the moment. So hence it is called what? Specific immunity, or it is called acquired immunity. During a course of lifetime we are taking this, we are developing this immunity, hence it is called as what? Acquired immunity. And this immunity developed after birth when encountered with pathogen, that is before birth, when we are inside the mother's womb only. And I think as I said, mother's first milk called colostrum is the first immunity. IG, you have studied in the last sessions that immunoglobulin is nothing but the antibody, and antibodies are of 5 types, and one type of antibody called immunoglobulin E is found in colostrum, and the first immunity that a baby develops after birth is from the mother's first milk called colostrum, and that immunity is going to last forever. So it is very, very important for a mother to feed the child with the milk at that particular point of time, because that immunity is going to last forever, and that is called inborn immunity. That is inborn immunity. But this is an immunity which is acquired when you are encountered with a disease. At that point of time you are going to take a vaccine, and your body is going to develop antibodies to fight against that disease causing organism. So it supplements the immunity provided by the innate immunity. So it is like a supplement. So when your inborn immunity is not able to fight at that point of time to kill the pathogens, then you are going to supplement it with an acquired immunity, that is by taking a particular vaccine. Hope you have understood what is immunity, what are the types of immunity. That is innate immunity, which is also called as non-specific immunity, right? Then we have studied about the various type of barriers that are involved in innate immunity, that is the physical barriers, the physiological barriers, the cytokine barriers, and the inflammatory barriers, right? So hope you have understood the important concepts what I have explained in today's session. So moving on, in the coming sessions I'll be dealing with the remaining concepts of this very important and interesting chapter called Human Health and Diseases. Till then, goodbye and thank you.